Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
We're just a couple of weeks away from the launch of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio 4.0. Just a couple of weeks away from episode 300. And as I've mentioned previously, there will be some slight changes. I'm still working on getting all of those finalized. It's not going to be anything major. And, you know, if you're listening to the show, you've noticed over the last, I'd say, month or so that I've sort of, you know, started talking a little bit more about self-help sort of stuff and, you know, human interesty sort of things and not necessarily so much news and politics, although I definitely do cover news and politics, and I'll still, you know, do some of that, but definitely it's going to be a lot more, at least the plan is, and I never really, you know, plan the show out completely. I do sort of a stream of consciousness sort of thing to where I sit down and I start talking, and then I go off on tangents and then subtangents and then tangents from the tangent, and then, you know, like somehow I wrap it back around, and sometimes I don't, and sometimes I just sit here and talk and ramble. But I thank you for listening. And one thing that will remain is the Ask Me Anything every Wednesday. So if you have questions that you want answered, you can send those over to ama@fppradio.com. And you might be thinking to yourself, Darryl, you sound a little bit different. And yes, I'm a little hoarse. I'm not a pony. I'm a little hoarse. And the reason I'm a little hoarse is I was at the Liberty Forum over the weekend, and I was talking a lot. I was talking to people most of Friday, most of Saturday, and not so much on Sunday. And they're also, you know, talking on Thursday to people. The Liberty Forum officially kicked off Friday morning. There was some unofficial events that happened that, you know, you didn't have to register for on Thursday night, and then Friday, Saturday, and then, you know, the final things on Sunday, which was basically a brunch. But Saturday, there was the keynote speech early in the morning. Well, not too early, but it was a pre-lunch keynote speech because the keynote speaker was 12 hours away in Moscow, Russia. So Edward Snowden gave the keynote speech on Saturday at 11 a.m., and one of the things that he touched on, he was asked the question of what would you need, or what would need to happen in order for you to come back to the United States. And I forget if it was before this question was asked or after, but he said, you know, people criticize me because I'm in Russia, but these are the same people that revoked my passport that prevent me from leaving Russia. And he said that his initial goal was to head, I believe, to Ecuador, somewhere down in Latin America, definitely. But, so, you know, he was attempting to, you know, hop, skip, and jump around the world to wind up getting to Central or South America. But his passport was revoked. He can't leave Russia, and now the people that are, you know, demanding that he leave Russia are also the same people that are preventing him from doing so. But they're saying you should come home and face a trial. And Edward Snowden said that he has actually said that he would come back to the United States if he could get a fair trial. And the official government response to Edward Snowden was, and I quote, "You won't be tortured." I wish I were making this up, but that is what Edward Snowden said. The official response from the federal government was, "You will not be tortured." And I think that's very telling. And there are other cases that we can look at to see that, you know, you will not get a fair trial. There is no way that you can get a fair trial. And the case that I actually wrote about this yesterday, and I didn't go quite as in-depth as I will here, and that's because when I write articles, I write them between 400 and 600 words. That way they're short enough to where, you know, some news outlet somewhere can pick them up if they want to. But I digress and I continue. So the Ross Ulbricht trial is a perfect example of how you cannot get a fair trial. There were so many things wrong with the trial of Ross Ulbricht, to where the defense was prevented essentially from making a case at all. Most of their witnesses were told that they can't testify. There were even, cross-examinations that happened that days after the cross-examination happened, the judge told the jury, forget everything this witness said in cross-examination, and only remember the things that he said that help our case. Basically, the judge didn't actually say things that help our case because, the judge doesn't really want people to know that the judge and the prosecution are getting paid by the same people. But again, I digress. So one of the things, and I've talked about this at length over like the last year and a half, the Ross Ulbricht trial, to where there was two different government agents. There was Sean Bridges and there was Carl Mark Force. And both of these agents were involved in corruption. They essentially embezzled funds. They wound up getting charged with money laundering and various corruption charges. And one of the two agents was also the one that coaxed the Dread Pirate Roberts, whoever that may have been at the time, into agreeing to do a murder for hire. And I contend, and I believe Ross and his family believes this strongly as well, because the reason I believe it is because it's basically things that was said by Ross's attorney, is that Ross was not the Dread Pirate Roberts during the time that the murder for hire even came about. And also, if you look at the chat logs, whoever Dread Pirate Roberts was essentially coerced into agreeing to the murder for hire thing in the first place. And additionally, that charge has still not actually been filed. So it's what they call an unfiled charge. But the judge in the distribution and kingpin case and whatever the other charges were, she looked at this unfiled charge and used that as justification to give Ross a double life sentence plus 40 years. Double life plus 40 years, and the man was not allowed to present a defense. Tell me how that's a fair trial. Tell me how that is supposed to happen in the supposed land of the free and home of the brave. And I will tell you that, yeah, it should not happen, but it does, and it happens all the time. So for those of you advocating that Edward Snowden come home and face a trial, just look at the trial of Ross Ulbricht. Look at the trial of any other whistleblower. Look at the trial of Chelsea Manning. Chelsea Manning was not allowed to put on a defense. But, again, you wind up having this show trial, get thrown in prison for an incredibly long time, and then people say, well, obviously, you're in prison because you're a criminal. Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to prove that you're not when you're not allowed to put on a defense, because there's no such thing as a fair trial. The only thing they can guarantee is, you won't be tortured. There's more. And I want to talk about a new fundraiser for Ross Ulbricht when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com. The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
So, over the weekend, Lynn Ulbricht, that's Ross's mom, announced the creation of a new fundraiser to wind up raising money for Ross's legal defense. And it's a really interesting thing. So, Ross wound up drawing a picture from jail, and the title is The Trial I Saw. So he drew a picture of the trial from what he experienced, what he saw, and, well, Ross's family decided that they would wind up trying to monetize this picture, and they're doing it in a very unusual way. There was a TV show that came on. I forget what the name of the show was. Somebody had told me over the weekend, but I've forgotten it again. But there was this TV show to where they would have a picture and you would answer questions correctly and it would reveal a square of the picture. And then the first person to correctly guess what the picture was would wind up winning a prize. Well, they're doing that, only instead of having to answer a question to reveal a square, you have to donate some money. And that amount of money is $1 per square. There are 9,180 squares in total. And right now, the picture is becoming sort of a digital graffiti board. To where it started off, where Tim Fry from Robertson Roberts Brokerage, he wound up putting a T in the thing. He donated 21 grams of gold. And there are 21 squares that if you get that square, you will wind up getting a gram of gold. So Tim Fry from Robertson Roberts, one of my fine sponsors, he wound up putting a T for Tim. And on Friday night, it was announced on Free Talk Live that art.freeross.com, that's art, A-R-T, .freeross.com, was where you could go to buy some squares, donate to this fundraiser. And so the T was there from Tim, and then there were just random squares here and there. The T has now become the T in the word Bitcoin. Someone has spelled out, they've purchased squares to spell out the word hero, put an exclamation, and underline the word hero. Someone has bought squares to spell out the words free Ross. There's a heart. And somebody started with the form of the heart, and then it wound up getting filled in. I actually wound up filling in the rest of the heart with $22 worth of donation. I've actually bought over $40 worth of squares. And then a friend of mine came over to me at the Liberty Forum, and she said, Darryl, who's got the computer with the Free Ross game on it? And I said, Free Ross game? And she said, yeah, the thing where you can look at the picture. And I said, oh, that's not a game, and it's not on any particular computer. It's a website, and so I pulled it up on my laptop, and she said, I want to play. And so I said, okay, do you have any Bitcoin? She said, no, do you have to have Bitcoin? I said, well, no, you can use PayPal. She said, well, I don't have a PayPal. It's like, all right, well, give me, how many squares do you want to buy? She said, 20. All right, well, give me a $20 bill, and then I'll buy the squares for you and pay with Bitcoin. And so I asked, I said, where do you want your squares? She said, just put one near each corner, and then the other ones I don't care. So I wound up making a smiley face. So right now there's Free Ross, Hero, Bitcoin. There's the @ symbol thing in the middle. Somebody wrote the word hi. There's the smiley face. Somebody put NH for New Hampshire. Somebody spelled out the word victory. Somebody has spelled out thank you, Ross. Someone has spelled out drop zone. Apparently that's the guy's website or whatever. And then I don't know if this was Michael Dean, but someone wrote the word worms. And the reason I suspect that it's Michael Dean is because Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show, that's sort of his catchphrase thing on all of his shows, to where he says worms. So it's like his warrant canary. So if he ever stops saying worms, then you know he's been contacted by the feds or captured or something. But anyway, so it's becoming like a digital graffiti board, and it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves to wind up getting all 9,180 squares revealed. And Derek Slopey, the guy that has programmed this, he has actually said that he's going to go through and do a time lapse of it after everything's revealed. So he'll go through, he knows what squares were revealed when, and he's going to run a thing, make a time lapse, and it's going to be a really neat video. And I'm watching the progress, not in real time, but, like several times a day. I'll go to art.freeross.com, take a look, and it's very interesting. So if you have a couple of dollars or a few, amounts of Bitcoin and you want to help Ross, definitely go and buy some squares, help reveal this photo. After the entire picture is revealed, the original will be auctioned off to raise even more money for his defense fund, and then prints will be sold as well. So art.freeross.com. And no, I am not being paid to talk about the Ross Ulbricht thing. I'm talking about this because this is something that I care passionately about, because Ross was screwed over in a major, major way, and the man does not deserve to be in jail. So art.freeross.com. Speaking of horrible things that have happened, you know what? Before I get into the news, there's something that I am still frustrated about. It happened on Thursday, and as many of you know, I spend a lot of time at the New Hampshire State House. I was not able to go on Thursday to attend what they call the executive session for the Election Law Committee. So in New Hampshire, the way the legislature works, you have the public hearing on the bill. Every bill has a public hearing. And then after the public hearing, doesn't necessarily have to be immediately after. Sometimes it is same day. Most of the time it's a week or a couple weeks later. They have what's called the executive session. That's where the committee that had the public hearing will make a vote and a recommendation to the full House of vote yes or vote no, kill the bill or pass the bill, or, there are a couple other variants of what they can do. They can say create a study committee. They can amend the bill and then recommend that it be adopted as amended, or they can say retain the bill, but they can't do that in the second year of the term. And this is the second year of the term. But anyway, on Thursday morning, there was a executive hearing or executive session on a bill to adopt approval voting. And there was a state rep, supposedly a Liberty rep, endorsed by the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. She has not been to any of the public hearings, and she made the motion to kill the approval voting bill, claiming that it was a quote-unquote fundamental change to the electoral system that needs to be killed. And, well, the Election Law Committee wound up adopting that recommendation, 18-0. It now goes to the full House. And I'm flustered and frustrated beyond belief that a supposed Liberty rep would vote to kill a bill that was sponsored and endorsed completely by Liberty reps. So she should have known who the reps were. Plus, it frustrates me that she was not even at the public hearing and made the recommendation to kill the bill. So, if you feel like doing some outreach to a state rep to let her know how frustrated I am and how frustrated you are, contact Yvonne Dean-Bailey. I'll put contact info in the show notes, and there's more when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Davi.
Hey, this is Davi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Davi. So, Davi, please tell the nice people more about Fiend Phone.
Fiend Phone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of Fiend Phone right now at fiendphone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve Fiend Phone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to fiendphone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's fiendphone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, November, phone.com.
Fiend Phone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Are you an advocate for free market money? Do you promote Bitcoin as an alternative in a fiat-centric world? If so, then you need Spend-A-Bit in your arsenal. Spend-A-Bit is the search engine for things you can buy with Bitcoin. Spend-A-Bit aggregates millions of products from thousands of Bitcoin-enabled merchants. Keep your money in the free economy. Spend-A-Bit. Use my affiliate link, spendabit.fppradio.com. And if you're a Bitcoin-accepting merchant, like I am, ask about their merchant suite to reach even more customers. Spendabit.fppradio.com. That's spendabit.fppradio.com. Now, there's some tech news that I want to talk about, and no, not the Apple-related stuff. I will talk about that on Wednesday because there was a question about something along the lines of, imagine you're a homeowner and you own a amount of apartments and the feds want to go into one of them, blah, blah, blah. So the question was asked, my thoughts on that. I will withhold those until Wednesday. But the tech news that I want to talk about actually has something to do with your television, possibly, maybe, if it's one of the so-called smart TVs. And I actually don't own a television, so this is not something that, concerns me directly, but I know a lot of people do own TVs. And, well, Samsung has come out saying that you should not discuss sensitive information in front of your smart TV. And when I first saw the headline, and I'll read the exact wording of the headline here from theweek.com. Headline, Samsung warns customers not to discuss personal information in front of smart TVs. And the photo that they have, it's a really interesting photo of a sink drain with soap bubbles around it and water going down in the drain, and it looks like an eyeball. And they have, this to where there's two of them side by side, so it looks like a pair of eyeballs. It looks like the television, or rather two televisions, make up part of a human face, to where, like Big Brother is watching. And so my first thought when I saw this was 1984 and the telescreen. And if you've not read 1984, I'll go ahead and say, spoiler warning. And I should not have to say spoiler warning about a book that's nearly 70 years old, but I'm saying it anyway. So the telescreen in 1984 was this sort of two-way television sort of thing to where they could watch you. They being, Big Brother, the government, the party, if you will, because that's what they referred to the ruling group as. in the book 1984, it was the party. And not everybody was in the party. And not everyone was controlled by the party. In fact, it explicitly says in the book that paroles and animals are free. So when people talk about how various things, it's like 1984. Well, no, not really, because 1984 was not that bad if you were part of the proletariat. Because the proletariat did not have to abide necessarily by all of the rules of the party. But members of the party had a bunch of extra rules that they had to abide by. Now, I'm not saying that the proles were actually free. The book says that the proles were free, but, it was one of those Bill Hicks sort of things of you're free to do as we tell you. You're free to do as we tell you. Go back to sleep, America. But I digress, and I jump into the article here from the week. Samsung has confirmed that its smart TV sets are listening to customers' every word, and the company is warning customers not to speak about personal information while near the television. Oh, right, and I realized that I never actually explained what the telescreen was, other than a device that could, go both ways. But they, being the party, would use the telescreens to watch people all the time. And they would sometimes do direct communication to a particular individual through the telescreens. They had the technology. It's like, what was that? The $6 million man? We have the technology. We can rebuild him. Well, they had the technology. They could communicate directly with you through your telescreen that you had to have on. And sort of like in North Korea, where they've got the propaganda broadcast coming through the radio, you can't turn it off. Well, the smart TV, I believe, is something that you can turn off, but I don't know how many people actually do. But again, I will continue with the article. The company revealed that the voice activation feature on its smart TVs will capture all nearby conversations. The TV sets can share the information, including sensitive data, with Samsung as well as, you guessed it, third-party services. The news comes after Shane Harris at the Daily Beast pointed out a troubling line in Samsung's privacy policy that reads, quote, "Please be aware that if your spoken words include personal or other sensitive information, that information will be among the data captured and transmitted to a third party." Samsung has issued a statement clarifying how the voice activation feature works. The statement reads, and I quote, "If a consumer consents and uses the voice recognition feature, voice data is provided to a third party during a requested voice command search. At that time, the voice data is sent the voice data is sent to a server, which searches for the requested content, then returns the desired content to the TV." The company added that it does not retain or sell the voice data, but it did not name the third party that translates user speech. So we do know that Samsung is saying don't discuss personal info. They're saying that, well, we're not storing the stuff, but they're not saying who is being the third party that translates the user speech into commands that the TV then complies with. We also don't know what the privacy policy is of the third party because we don't know who the third party is. So this is somewhat disturbing in a lot of ways, and I know that Brian Sovereign discussed this on an episode of Sovereign Tech a couple of weeks ago. I forget the exact episode number. I will try to find that, put it in the show notes before the show gets posted. So, yeah, this is, again, very disturbing. And something else that's disturbing, and again, I'll speak at length on this on Wednesday, is the FBI insistence that Apple wind up cracking up the form, or cracking open the Apple iPhone that belonged to the shooter in San Bernardino, the December 2nd shooting. And, well, there's some interesting news that came out over the weekend that apparently the FBI reset the password on the Apple iCloud account, and they have now admitted that at least 7 weeks worth of information is not going to be recoverable, but they're still demanding that Apple crack into the phone And John McAfee has issued what I perceive to be a very unlibertarian offer of saying, FBI, I will show you how to decrypt encryption. And again, I'll talk at length on Wednesday. Send those questions, AMA at fppradio.com.